Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
G'day, dear listeners. You are listening to Israel on My Mind, a show that broadcasts all the weekly goodness that flows like milk and honey from the Holy Land straight into your ears with humorous and happy news stories here on Israel News Talk Radio. G'day, Ross.
Hello, Jono. How are you?
Doing pretty well, thank you, my friend. We missed you last week. We're going to be talking later on in this program as to why we missed you, but that's not what we're talking about right now. What are we talking about?
We have a congressional member by the name of Representative Ilhan Omar. Remember Ilhan? She's had a few run-ins. She's said a few things that really kind of labeled her as anti-Semitic. And I would say, for good reason, they've
Absolutely.
been labeled that way. But look, sometimes you wake up and it's a new world. In my case, I wake up, and one of the things that I see earlier in the week is this grand announcement, Jono, that Representative Ilhan Omar, same chick, is now going to be part of a Black Jewish Congressional caucus. This caucus is put together by several representatives within our body there in the Congress, and so they have various Black Congress people and Jewish Congress people, and they put together this nice little caucus. And hopefully it will advance the causes of Black people, but it's also going to stand against things, I guess, like anti-Semitism. Now, when questioned about, like I would question, I would say, I'm sorry, why is Ilhan Omar on this team?
I'm trying to figure it out. It
seem like she's a good fit. Well, what their answer is, the American Jewish Committee says they hope that this will sensitize Ilhan Omar. Now, that, to me, is like putting a little child who loves candy in a candy store, or a fox in a chicken house, or I don't know. And at first I thought maybe it was from the Babylon Bee or one of these sites.
One of these satire sites.
I thought it was, I laughed. I thought, oh, that's a good one. That's really good. It's like Roger Waters representing the Jewish state. You know, Roger Waters is going to be representing Israel, and, come on, man. But evidently, maybe, we can always hope that it does some good. I just don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, I'm not going to put money on that. It's a topsy-turvy world that we live in. Anyway, I'll tell you what, we have got a whole lot to talk about. What are some of the things we're talking about, real quick?
I think we have a story about a strange bank robbery.
Yeah, how to rob a bank with an avocado. We'll be back right after these messages. Dear listeners, don't go away.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Welcome back, dear listeners. You are listening to Israel on My Mind with Jono Vandor and Ross Nichols here on Israel News Talk Radio. G'day, Ross.
Hello, Jono. How are you today?
Doing very well, thank you, my friend. I missed you last week. Why did I miss you last week?
Man, look, Jono, I hated to miss the show, but I had a little trip that I had to go to our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. with my good friends, Dave and Patty Tyler.
G'day,
Hello,
Dave and Patty.
You know, it was a toss-up, Jono. As much as I hated not to be with you, I had a special invite to go to a particular event in the nation's capital, and I got to meet somebody that you and I have talked about quite a few times on our show. Mm-hmm. This particular guy has been in trouble for things like social media. He's been put in social media jail. He's gotten in trouble for walking his dog and not cleaning up after his dog. I got to meet Yair Netanyahu.
Netanyahu. Excellent stuff. Right. I want to hear all about that. I'm a big fan of Yair Netanyahu, and I think the first time that we spoke to about him on the program was for that alleged incident by which he seemed to incite a cranky neighbor to go and take photos of dog droppings on the road and then post it.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember.
Anyone who has the ability to do that, I'm absolutely up for having a beer with.
Well, he really was. It was a wonderful time because I work with Dave and Patty in the security business. They have this company, and part of that company allowed me to go as a consultant for their group as a director of the U.S. training with AAC. Advanced Automation Corporation is Dave and Patty's company. I got to go to Israel last June, if you remember, and go through this security course.
Right.
It's really come in handy for our tours to Israel. So the owner of that company, this is how I, little old me, ended up in a room with the son of the Israeli prime minister. In the company that puts that training on is a group called Advanced Security Training Institute. Mm-hmm. And Yair is working with them for several months. He's touring the United States. He's visiting various, let's say, right-leaning, if that's fair. I think that's fair. Mm-hmm. Let's say supportive of Israel, groups that are supportive of Israel. Yair is traveling around with Mr. Stefanski, who owns Advanced Security Training Institute, and they're working in concert together. Now, they do a lot of things. But one of the great things about it is that Israel, unfortunately, has had to learn some very valuable lessons in security, not in many forms of security, not only tactical response and care, but cybersecurity. Well, this ASTI puts this training on. So they're coming to the States, and as I understand it, Yair is now working with them. And so this was a wonderful gathering. I was invited because of my work with the Tylers to go into, get this, it was like a VIP deal, Jono. But, we did talk. It wasn't just like one of these formal, stuffy things where you only get to get your picture with him. Dave and Patty and I had a really nice talk with Yair on a couple of occasions throughout the evening. And I did talk about Israel on my mind and talked about Israel News Talk Radio. I was also given an opportunity to talk about my good friend and co-host in Australia, Jono.
There you go.
And man, it was really nice. It was incredible. I'll tell you all about it. I mean, it was.
Well, let me ask you a question about it. So I know that he. You were able to give him a book. Now, just remind everybody, you are a vice president of United Israel World Union. So
that's right.
There is a book written about that organization by Ralph Bunton, if I'm not mistaken, called...
That's right. It's called The Book of David, and it's about the founder of United Israel World Union, David Horowitz, who was also considered the Dean of Correspondence at the United Nations. He was there from before the founding, actually, in upstate New York before the founding of the United Nations. And a lot of people have a negative view of the United Nations because of their anti-Israel bias. But when David was there as a correspondent, he was also, as I said, the dean of the correspondence, the foreign press, and so forth. He was there, and get this, he had a very long-standing relationship with a then young, fiery ambassador for Israel by the name of Benjamin Netanyahu. Right. So in 1984, when Bibi goes to the UN, he meets almost immediately David Horowitz, who was already an elderly gentleman, but a statesman at the UN, a fierce lion of Judah, we like to say. And so they became close. And of course, David being sort of this lone Jewish voice at the UN, Bibi would often go by his office and celebrate the festivals. If he was in town, he would go by for Hanukkah parties. So long story short, my coworker and my associate, David Tyler, took a copy of Ralph Bunton's book, which Ralph had signed, and he brought it, and we were able to give this to Yair. And David told him, he said, look, I know when you're on your trip, people probably come up to you and say, hey, would you give your dad this? Would you give, He said, I didn't want to do that, and I don't want to sound like that's what I'm doing, but it is what I'm doing because we feel like this is the best opportunity we have to get this book, which honors not only our founder, but your dad, and it explains some of the great relationship that existed between David Horowitz and your father. And he said, look, I want you to know that one of the things that you need to know about your father and David Horowitz is that on David's 90th birthday, Bibi Netanyahu wrote a very warm greeting to him for his birthday celebration. So, Yair said, hey, I'm excited. I'm going to give this to my dad. I appreciate you doing this. And
that's great.
We were thrilled.
No doubt. And I saw the photos. You can see those photos. In fact, you should upload some of those to Israel in My Mind so people can see them, Ross. Now, I'm looking at a Jerusalem Post article, the title of which says, Yair Netanyahu, Trump, a rock star, best friend Jews ever had. And it goes on to say that the Prime Minister's son then went on to tell the American audience that the vast majority of Israelis adore America and adore President Trump. He's a real rock star in Israel. Now, is this the meeting that you were at? Is this? I mean, what did he have to say when you were there in this regard?
It could be. I don't know if that article is based on the meeting that I was at. I was in the first meeting that he held with an American audience because he flew into the U.S. the day that I was in D.C., and they brought him with his security entourage a few hours early to kind of, make sure the place was secure, as you can imagine. But when he got up to speak, there was some informality and, people having hors d'oeuvres and that kind of thing. But once he got up to speak after a really nice introduction by the founder of this company, he said, listen, I want you to know how much that we, Israel, appreciates the American or actually any of our allies, but this American strong base of Israel supporters. And he said, I don't know if it means so much to you, but I want you to understand this. He said, Israel has had a few really good supporters. He said, Harry Truman, within minutes after Israel declared its independence, they stamped and said, we recognize Israel. He said, Lord Balfour from the Balfour Declaration. Remember, you and I and a group were in Israel for the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration a couple of years ago. And he said, and then I want to take you back 2,500 years to Cyrus. And he said, do you understand that we still talk about Cyrus as being a great non-Jewish friend to Israel? He said, mark this down, 2,500 years from now, people will be talking about the great things that Trump did for Israel. He said his moving the embassy is a bold and courageous move, and we love him for it. And then recognizing the Golan, it's just we absolutely adore President Trump, and so I mean it was one of those moments where you just kind of stick your chest out and you feel pretty proud to be in the room, and
so
it was
America
nice.
should, America should, and I don't think that's far fetched for him to say that. Really, honestly, I think that that's an accurate statement and a fair speculation that in centuries to come. People will be talking about what the impact that Donald Trump had in Israeli history, the positive impact that he's had in the Trump administration, America as a whole. Good on him. Look, there's a lot I love about Yair. I'd love to have a beer with Yair. Let's see if we can do that when we're there next.
Who knows? Who knows, Jono? I mean, it was one of those deals. I am close with Yisrael Stefanski, who owns this company, and he's traveling around with Yair, for the next several weeks in the States. You just never know. In fact, he jokingly told me Yair was standing there, but this Yisrael Stefanski said, we were going to come to Louisiana and let him address one of your groups, but it looks like you're going to be in Israel, so you're going to miss out. I told him I was going to take him on a swamp tour, let him, get in an airboat, and can you imagine? Wouldn't that be fun? Now, the one thing I was going to say, though, I saw he's posted photos Yair has on his Twitter account with other people, like big name people on Fox News and so forth. I might have missed it, but I didn't see the photo of me and Yair. Did you? Did you on his Twitter?
I haven't looked at his Twitter. I haven't looked at his Instagram. But I tell you what, if it's not there, let's give him a buzz and ask him what's going on.
It could be an oversight.
Could be an oversight.
It really could be. Or you know how they're watching his social media. Maybe they thought I was a little bit hard for his audience and they screened it out or something.
You were censored.
Who knows?
Who knows?
I was censored.
We'll chat a little bit more about this when we get back, because we're going to a break. We will be back right after these messages. Dear listeners, don't go away.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I'm Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with Love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with Love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back, dear listeners. You're listening to Israel on My Mind with Jono Van Dorn, Ross Nichols here on Israel News Talk Radio. We went to the break talking about Ross's encounter, his meeting last week with Yair Netanyahu. We can forgive him for not being on the program last week. He was rubbing shoulders with the influential in Israel's politics. And we just went to the break talking about how Yair was saying that in centuries to come, if not millennia, people will be talking about the positive influence that Trump has had on Israeli history for the positive, and no doubt that is true. And he cited, that the moving of the embassy to Jerusalem, recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. By the way, speaking of that, what's the latest here? Moldova? What do you know about this?
Yeah. I actually did look at it because I have to be honest. Now, Jono, I might be able to throw a country out and you know exactly where it's at. I don't know that I've ever heard of Moldova. I know that's embarrassing, but I hadn't. But evidently, Moldova is in Eastern Europe. Romania's to the west. Ukraine surrounds it on the north, east, and south. Uh-huh. And they have joined a very, very small group of countries. The U.S., Guatemala, and there's not even another one, is there, that have officially moved their embassy to Jerusalem.
Prime Minister Pavel Filip, I think, is responsible for that. So good stuff, Moldova. Well done. We want to see more of that. I wish Australia would get into gear.
Hey, look, I'm not so sure that Australia won't get into gear. I really I kind of like ScoMo. I think maybe
I like ScoMo. Look, since the election, ScoMo won with a convincing majority. Now he can afford to be a little bit more tough. What he did prior to the election was kind of limp-wristed, I think. As I've said before, it was maybe one half step forward and a full step back. And what he did was he recognized half of Jerusalem and said that, but we're not going to move the embassy. Now, what I'd like for ScoMo to do, obviously, is to recognize all of Jerusalem and to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, obviously, following that which the Trump administration has done.
Well, I tell you, and let our listeners know, or I want to let our listeners know that I have a lot of respect for the AJA and David Adler, and I know that you've worked with them and have become pretty close with the leadership of that group, very close, in fact. And it's not really a far-fetched thing. If people want to follow the Australian Jewish Association on Facebook, this David Adler and his team, which you're now at least somewhat part of, it's a very strong advocacy group on behalf of Israel. And I think that they could probably put a little more pressure on ScoMo's government, don't you? Maybe,
yeah, absolutely. And I have no doubt. That the Australian Jewish Association will continue to apply that pressure and encourage the ScoMo government to make the right decisions. And I'm very thankful for the Australian Jewish Association. So, dear listeners, there's a Facebook page. Go to Australian Jewish Association, AJA, and like that page and keep up to date. And look, you can become a member like I am. We're going to have, by the way, I'm just going to drop a little hint now. This is the first time that we've mentioned this on air, but we're going to be doing something very exciting with them and with, look, can we announce it now? I reckon.
I say go ahead and do it. I'm excited. I love this group. I'm almost an honorary Australian because of what you and the AJA do for Israel. So go ahead and tell them, Jono. I'd say lay it out there.
I'm really excited because we are organizing a tour, an Israel tour, with the Australian Jewish Association in conjunction with Israel News Talk Radio. Tamar will be joining us on the tour. Dr. David Adler, who you just mentioned, will be joining us on the tour. It'll be you and myself as well, and a bunch of other guests. And who knows, maybe you'll bring your mate Yair Netanyahu on the tour. I would love to see him. We'll have a bunch of special guests. We're going to be taking people in March 2020. We're calling it the 2020 Vision Israel Tour.
I love it.
2020 Vision Israel Tour. Links to follow. But we're going to be doing that tour. It is going to be focusing on security, safety, strategy. It's going to be focusing on politics. And we're going to be visiting some very special places. And as I said, we're going to be speaking to some very special guests. It's a tour that I think is different to any other tour that I've seen because of those particular focuses.
I do too.
Very different to what you and I have done in the past, but I'm extremely excited about this tour in 2020 March. 2020 Vision Israel tour coming very, very soon. Links will follow. So keep an eye on the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page.
Yeah, I think it's so unique. You and I, when we first started talking about this, and of course you got input from various other groups, and what do you think we ought to do? It really is a unique tour, so I'm excited about that.
It's going to be really cool. It's going to be great. And I know listeners of Israel News Talk Radio are thinking, what, are you just telling us that Tamar is joining? We can travel around Israel with Tamar? Yes, that is exactly what I'm telling you.
Right.
Tamar's going to be joining us on the tour, and she's going to have a lot to say in key places, so that people can see, they can bypass the fake news and see what is the reality on the ground, and see Israel with perfect vision, hence the 2020 Vision Israel Tour. All right. Now, speaking of being aligned with Israel, speaking of also the UN, we mentioned a little bit earlier, Al Jamina says for the first time at UN, India votes with Israel and against. That's what you're going to talk about? Against group with ties to terror. Tell us all about it, Ross.
Well, it's funny. Ever since Prime Minister Modi came to Israel, we knew right away, everyone in the world knew that Bibi and Prime Minister Netanyahu, Prime Minister, there was a bromance there, is what the media called it. I mean, these guys really, really hit it off. But even though they had a good, strong friendship, that relationship, those walls that are erected within the UN that has so many of these people scared to stand up on behalf of Israel, I don't know if somebody's dragging them off in the back and beating them or what they're doing. But nations, representatives of the nations, seemingly lose their spine when they walk into those the General Assembly Hall. Mm-hmm. But not this time, as you pointed out. This time, India stands up. Now, what was going on is there is now I'm going to put quotes. Picture my fingers doing the air quotes.
The quotation marks, go.
The quotation mark. It's a human rights group called Shahed, a Palestinian human rights group that wanted to be accepted into observer status.
Right.
All right.
Sounds like typical UN behavior, yeah.
And because of this, now this observer status isn't like a full-fledged nation, but it puts them in a category that gives them a little more voice. And so India, thank God, India said, no, we're going to vote against this.
Yeah, good stuff.
One of the softer methods is that countries abstain or whatever. They don't state their ground. But in this case, I am very excited. And Israel at the UN was very complimentary of India for doing this. And I'm excited because I think that we might see more of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the tide is slowly turning. You have Moldova moving their embassy. Good on Moldova. You have India voting right. Hey, man,
positive indication of things to come,
place.
Ross. Positive indication of things to come.
Well, while we're talking about Palestinians and who's a friend and who's not, this would fall, Jono, in the who's not. All right. So Palestinians are protesting the Trump peace plan, and not only are they protesting it, but Wassel Abu Yusuf, I think I said that right, has announced a popular uprising to protest. Now, June 25th and June 26th is this Peace to Prosperity conference in Bahrain, where the U.S. group, Greenblatt, and the team are going to lay out with Kushner the peace prosperity portion, the economic portion of Trump's deal of the century. Well, they haven't even seen it, Jono. And they're already.
They haven't even seen it. They've boycotted. They've already said, no, we're not even going to attend. We don't even want to know what it says. We're not going to Bahrain. We're disappointed that other people are. We're going to whinge about it. Not only that, but we're going to have an uprising against the Trump peace plan, even though we haven't seen it yet. We're just, it's kind of pessimistic all round, isn't it?
That's right. Picture a little badass boy with his hands crossed in front of his chest with his face with a scowl on it. And he's saying, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send some fiery balloons into your fields. They're already mad. Yeah. They've announced this Abu Yusuf. He says that there should be struggling action to foil the deal of the century and its economic aspect, and to voice their rejection of all American policies. Just carte blanche, everything.
Regardless.
Like just boycott.
Regardless of what it says.
Now, the worst part for them is they're going to go to what they call friction points and stir up some trouble. And they mean Palestinian cities, but also checkpoints. That's not going to turn out good. I'm going to go ahead and go on record and tell you that's not going to turn out good.
No. Obviously, we'll have something else to say about that next week. Before we go to a break, on the positive, let's end on a high note.
Okay.
Young Jewish woman outrages 1.6 billion Muslims on Temple Mount. Why? Because she uncovered, she pulled out of her pocket a flag, Hurut Canada, with the Israeli star, a blue and white flag. Lauren Isaacs from Toronto went up with her mum onto the Temple Mount, where they took a picture of her holding her Hurut Canada flag. Palestinian TV has expressed outrage.
Yep, I know it. I tell you what, how about that? Good job on her. Now the thing is, though, it's so funny. It says that she's angered 1.6 billion Muslims. I would say it's probably not true because all 1.6 of them don't know about it, but I'd say at least 0.6 billion probably are mad at this.
Quite possibly. We're going to another break. We will talk about this and more when we return right after these messages. Don't go away.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Bentako, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
Welcome back, dear listeners. You are listening to Israel on My Mind with Jono Vandor and Ross Nichols here on Israel News Talk Radio. We went to the break talking about Lauren Isaacs, who made the news, 23-year-old of Toronto. She went on vacation to Israel. She went up on the Temple Mount. Now they get very cranky. Now when I go up on the Temple Mount,
you can't do what I do. As a non-Jew, I can walk all over the place and never get harassed. I mean, I can almost just go up there eating a snow cone and everything's nice. Right. You, on the other hand, they single you out, and all my Jewish friends, and they walk you around closely guarded and video cameras, and it's just ridiculous.
And they make sure we don't pray. They make sure we don't bow down. They make sure we don't pick anything up. We don't touch anything. We're heavily guarded. We're not allowed to have any sort of religious expression, nothing, and just get off as quickly as possible. I've been up there before, not with the Jewish delegation that is singled out and the WOC, follow us around and all that sort of stuff. I have been up there before, and I was taking photos of the WOC, tightly following around and leading around a small group of Jewish people. And when they saw me taking photos, they quickly came up angrily and said, "Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish?" They wanted to know, because if so, then they wanted to herd me into the control group.
She and her mom were not escorted.
There you go. So
I don't know.
And but as you were saying before, it gives a little bit more freedom, and it gave her the freedom to pull out this flag and have a photo taken on the Temple Mount. Good on you, Lauren. She said, "I'm a proud Jew and unapologetic Zionist, and I was standing on my holy ground." And when you're standing on holy ground, I don't think there's anything wrong with holding your flag with pride. And she's absolutely right. We should be absolutely free to pray, to hold a flag, to be patriotic, and to be respectful of the fact that it is the holiest site in the world to Jews. Good on her. I think it's a good thing.
When we go up there, we have to tell people, here are the rules, and that is the one place that we go to in Israel that is not under, when I say this, in other words, the Waqf controls that area, and you're not allowed to have religious freedom there if you're non-Muslim. But if you go to any other site, whether it's Jewish or Christian, Muslims are free to do whatever, as long as it's within the boundaries of the law. So anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're right. It's just that we have to last time we spoke, and we have to do an update. Last time we spoke, we talked about the Lebanese monkey that went on a 10-day holiday into Israel, having escaped from a farm owned by a French nun in Lebanon. Did I get that right?
Right. Yep, that's it.
So they found him. They caught him. They caught this little monkey. Experts from Yodfat Monkey Forest finally managed to tempt the Yavut monkey into a cage with food after he was spotted in villages. Now, they tried to catch him on numerous occasions, people citing him and taking video footage, but he evaded capture for almost 2 weeks in northern Israel, up to 20 kilometers from the border. So he really went on a bit of a journey.
He did. He overstayed his visa is what happened.
That's exactly what happened.
And they will, in Israel, they don't let you do that. You have to go back.
That's serious stuff. Yeah. So they will be reuniting him with his French nun to go back to his convent or whatever it is in southern Lebanon. But, I hope he had a good holiday. I'm sure they're treating him well.
How long was he in Israel? Because, sometimes all it takes for me is a couple of weeks. I think he got 2 weeks out of it.
I think he almost got 2 weeks. It was definitely at least 10 days. He gets a trip to the vet, and he's going to be reunited with his owner. So good on you, little monkey. I hope you had a good holiday. Now, speaking of monkeys, the Jerusalem Zoo, the Jerusalem Biblical Zoo, I've been there. It's a good place.
Okay.
So rare golden lion tamarin twins are born. These are little golden monkeys, Ross.
All right. Okay.
You know how there's the in Papua New Guinea, for example, there's the birds of paradise. They're a bit more elaborate. Right. They're fancy. They've got fancy feathers. They do elaborate little dances and stuff. That's the birds. This would be the monkey of paradise. This monkey is. This would be. Do you know what? This is probably the Donald Trump of monkeys. It's got the it's got the hairstyle. It's got the long flowing golden locks.
Right.
And it's really quite impressive. But it has just.
Do Do they wear little red hats?
No, but that's
No,
there's
just
an idea.
Golden hair. I know it. Go
Golden
ahead.
hair. Little Trump monkeys. And now they've got little Trump monkey babies, which is great. So congratulations. But listen, in the 1980s, fewer than 80 golden lion tamarins existed in the wild. And now there's the numbers have blown out to over 3,000, thanks to efforts like that in the Jerusalem Zoo. So grand stuff. Apparently, they eat insects, spiders, fruit, sap, and bird eggs. Spiders.
And so when I'm in Jerusalem in a couple of weeks, maybe I'll go by and see the little Trump monkeys myself and maybe
Trump
take
monkeys.
a picture.
Yeah, they should be renamed little Trump monkeys. There's that. Now, rushing through, there's so much to report on this week. I'll tell you what. We have to talk about this. We've got a few minutes. I have to throw this into the mix. Okay, you ready? This is in the Times of Israel. Israeli ex-con holds up 2 banks armed with an avocado.
With an avocado.
This is the thing.
Okay.
You ready?
All right. I'm ready.
A 47-year-old resident of South Israel is facing charges of aggravated robbery after successfully stealing nearly 30,000 shekels, that's about 8,300 US, from 2 Beersheba banks last month using an avocado. The man, a resident of a Bedouin village,
he walks in with an avocado.
He entered a postal bank branch at the Big Beersheba shopping mall in mid-May, handed the cashier a misspelt note demanding she hand over the cash at the counter. It said, hand over the money in the drawer, the note read, and misspelt the Hebrew word for drawer, according to a report Thursday on Channel 12 television news. The cashier appeared to hesitate, and so the robber spoke for the first time, saying, put the money in a bag or I'll throw this grenade. He then holds up this black round object, which he was holding in his right hand, which he claimed was a grenade, but later turned out to be an avocado that he had painted black.
That is unbelievable.
That's what he did.
I tell you what. Yeah. And he pulled it off. So he gets away with 30,000. And what did they later bust him on the street with?
No, so he had success with that one, and he thought, you know what, that works so well, better do it again. So 5 days later, the same man walked into another branch of the postal bank and did the same thing, brandishing his blackened avocado and threatened to blow the place up with his avocado. He left the bank with another 12,000 shekels. So, yeah, he really kind of did okay. But overhead security cameras, it just didn't work out for him, provided enough clues for the man's identity to be revealed. And it wasn't too long before he was thrown into prison for 3 years. Apprehended, 3-year prison term for robbery. So he should. Weaponizing avocados.
That's right. We talked a little bit about something like that. Guess who else is getting thrown in jail right now?
Who's getting thrown in jail?
Tehran is not a very happy place, let's just say.
No, it's not.
But it looks like, according to The Guardian, I have an article up in front of me about, it says Tehran closes 547 restaurants for breaking Islamic principles.
Oh, they're having a crackdown.
Right? Now,
they're having a crackdown, aren't they?
Jono.
They are, because now this is in the also the Jerusalem Post. Iran hires, quote, morality police to ensure women are wearing their hijab, right? One group that says that has caused the morality police ire is an activist group called White Wednesday, which supports women wearing white and discarding their hijabs, the Telegraph reported. Now, is this report in The Guardian in relation to that?
It is. It's the same subject. They arrested 11 shop owners, but they've closed down 547. The head of Tehran's guidance court, I'm quoting, which deals with, quote, cultural crimes and social and moral corruption. Corruption, Jono, called on Tehran citizens to report cases of immoral behavior. And they say, look, here's a phone number. Just text. I guess you text immoral behavior to this phone number. And it said, here's one of their people said this. People would like to report those breaking the norms, but they don't know how. So we decided to accelerate dealing with instances of public immoral acts. Mohammed Mehdi Haj Mohammadi told the judiciary's Mizan online. Wow. Listen now, Jono, these people are wicked, it sounds like. They're busting them for violations of being immoral. They have cited some of them removing their hijab in the car, hosting mixed dance parties, probably Zumba, and posting immoral content on Instagram, like probably some woman smiling.
Oh, my goodness. And as a result, you're telling me that they've closed down 547 restaurants. There's probably other things they've closed down too. That kind of censorship is crazy. You don't see that in Israel. In Israel, there is much more freedom for people to be able to express and to wear what they want to wear and attire themselves according to their level of modesty. And so, they should have the choice, but not in Iran. No. Nope. But
I tell you what, though, and we ought to keep our hands together and clap for these people who are standing against this hateful regime, because a lot of people are really getting sick of it. And the fact that they have to close down 547 shops, and some of these cafe owners were very bold in what they posted publicly about how they refused to put cameras up so that people could spy on the people that were frequenting their establishments. So, look, there are a lot of people in Iran that are fed up with this hyper-religious group that's trying to keep them oppressed. So I really hope that they do a good job and push through this.
I hope so too. Rather be in Israel. That is all we have time for this week. Dear listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope you will join us again this time next week. And until then, have a great one.
Have a beautiful week.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.